Hello, everyone. Welcome to another virtual event here at Unabridged Bookstore. Um, for those of you that are new to the way that we do things, just a quick introduction about Zoom and our events here. Um, as you're entering the chat room, you'll notice that you are muted. For the security and comfort of our guests tonight, we will ask you to remain muted while they are presenting, asking their questions, having their conversation. And later in the evening, we'll have a chance to do some Q&A. So if you do have a question that you'd like to share with either of our guests tonight, you are free to pop those into the chat at the bottom of your screen. And then when we have some time, we'll go to those. And we are so excited tonight to have with us Aimee Nezhukumatathil and Ruben Quesada. Aimee's book just came out recently, and it is already been something of a staff favorite and a bestseller here at Unabridged Bookstore. We're very taken immediately with all that is offered in this book tonight, so we're very excited that you get to hear from her tonight. A little bit about Aimee. Before this book came out, her most recent book of poetry, Oceanic, won the Mississippi Institute of Arts and Letters Award. She's won other awards and fellowships and grants from National Endowment for the Arts, Mississippi Arts Council, and McDowell. She's had writing appear in Poetry Magazine, New York Times Magazine, ESPN, and Tin House, and currently serves as poetry faculty for the writing workshops in Greece and a professor of English and creative writing at the University of Mississippi's MFA program. And of course, we are extremely excited to have Ruben Quesada back. Ruben is the author of Revelations, Next Extinct Mammal, and Exiled from the Throne of Night. He currently teaches writing and publishing at the Vermont College of Arts and online for UCLA Writers Program. Philanthropy includes serving as the vice chair at the State of Illinois Poet Laureate Search Committee and as member of the PEN America Literary Awards. He's also a contributor at Kenyon Review and poetry editor at HNI Magazine. He's also been a friend of the shop and a friend of ours for a while, so we're glad to have him back tonight. As we go along, there will be a link dropped into the chat there. If you want to purchase either of those books, those will be available online for pickup or for shipping. We're very excited to have both of you here tonight. So give us a warm virtual welcome to Aimee and Ruben.
Okay. Hey, everybody. I couldn't unmute myself for a minute. Good. Hey, Ruben.
Hi, Aimee. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's so good to see your face.
Likewise, especially under these circumstances. I know. It must be pretty wild having to tour in this way.
Yeah, it's as I was saying a little bit earlier before we got on, it's been a blessing more than it has been a curse. Of course, like in any other situation, you and I would probably be leaving and having a cocktail or dinner together after this talk. So I'm so sad that we can't do that. But it has been so lovely to be able to, have an event, travel to, like, go to Chicago or go to Seattle, and then still make it back, walk out of my room and walk upstairs and tuck in my youngest son and read him a bedtime story. So that has been really nice. And actually, and overall, like, I'm able to reach people from all over the country at any given time. Like, I've had people in Florida coming to my Midwestern events and vice versa, people from the coast coming to my, from the West Coast coming to my East Coast events, and all different permutations from around the world, actually. So that's been something that I did not anticipate when I was like, no, when they first told me that all the events will have to be virtual.
Well, I'm glad that you're able to be here with us, and maybe next time you'll add Chicago to your list of places to stop, and we'll have to make up for that dinner and that drink.
Yes, absolutely.
So I want to just dive right into your book. Over the years, I love reading creative nonfiction essays, and two women that I think of and I was reminded of as I was reading your work are Cheryl Strayed, right? She wrote Wild. I especially love her essay that's in online at the Sun magazine called The Love of My Life.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yes, and Eula Biss, who's here in Chicago, another great essayist. And what really draws me to their work, like your own, is this ability to weave lyrical, sometimes meditative moments without losing the momentum of the narrative. And it's something that I think you see in masterful writers.
You're way too kind. You're way too kind.
Oh, well, it's, I read a lot, and as you know, tons of books are published a year, and there are few and far between that really make, an impression. And I was really struck by you call your essays and your acknowledgments love songs to the planet for your children. Mm. And I love that. And it reminded me of a poetry collection I read earlier this year called The Boy in the Labyrinth by Oliver de la Paz.
Yeah.
And, I was really struck by, I don't have any children, but, I was struck by how both of you as writers are thinking about your children. And I asked Oliver this, and I'm curious, what do you hope your children are going to take from these memories that you've captured?
That's such a good question, and thank you so much. I know that it's something that I pay so close attention to, because I remember very distinctly, especially kind of when I was a grad student, and the few chances I did get to be in the audience for someone who was a parent, it was very much, parenthood was very much spoken about like, well, you'll understand if you only had kids, and so it made me, sit there, and at the time I didn't know if I wanted kids, wasn't really remotely interested, and at the time it made me really think like, well then, gosh, if you're only writing to like one, if you make it seem like only parents can understand you, it just seems like you're knocking out a whole population. So I swore, like, if I ever write a book, I would never do that to anybody. So that I've had many people who have had kind of really crappy relationships with their parents, or people who don't have kids, say the kindest things, and I just feel so grateful for that, because that's something I never wanted to isolate people from, and I want to just embrace humanity, not just people who are parents, or not just people who have had healthy relationships with their parents or anything like that. So thank you for mentioning that, because that doesn't, I don't get to talk about that very often. But I guess maybe to answer your question about what do I hope my kids, well, right now they're in that almost everything I do stages. It's so embarrassing. Like, they're tweens now. They're 10 and 13. And actually my littlest one is still on board with most things. He let me do, like, I have a little, like, a holograph manicure. He let me put that on his thumbs, at least, that kind of thing. My eldest, I think, cringes at everything I do or say, in a good way. He's, he always, I feel like he wants to pat me on the head, like, Mommy, that's not how they dance, or, whatever. So it's funny, it's not that long ago, but they were 6 and 9 when I wrote the majority of these essays, and then some of them when they were infants. So they are already like, I vaguely remember this, Mommy, or they don't remember it at all. So in some ways already it's serving as a scrapbook of their childhood, kind of in some ways. And I'm hoping what they see is that, there are many times where their mommy may have messed up and maybe didn't do the right thing or was trying to figure it out. But ultimately what they see on the page, hopefully there, is how much, the thing that nobody can deny, I think, is how much I love them, and how much I just cherished being with them, even on those snow-filled days of their infancy and thinking I was never going to write again. there's really ultimately still no other place I'd rather be than with my family. And I want them to have that on record, that that was the case. So we'll see. I don't know how they're going to feel, in another 5-10 years, but right now I know they're so excited. They turn to a book and they can't believe, like, my names are here, like so right now it's great. I'm hoping that it stays that way for a while.
That's amazing. I think you're leaving them a great scrapbook of their childhood. It's amazing.
So I hope
Would you mind reading something for us?
Sure. Let me see. Maybe, just since I was talking about that, maybe let me read a little snippet of, it was actually the first essay I wrote when I moved to Mississippi. I'm now here in Oxford, Mississippi. And those of you who are here with us, if you can type in on the chat, like, where's everybody from? I don't want to assume everybody's here from Chicago, but if you can type in the chat, I just want to see where everybody's zooming in from. When I first moved to Mississippi, our local Audubon Center hosts, oh my goodness, I still don't have the page numbers here, hosts different bird count days. And what it is you just give your address of where you are at this one particular day, or I think it was like 2 days. And then you are to spend X number amount of hours tracking all the birds you see. And so we did that. I lived on the grounds of, sorry, this book is so new, I still don't know the page numbers. So let me see. I lived on the grounds of John Grisham. If you guys know John Grisham, the A Time to Kill author, the murder mystery author. He has a brand new book out actually too. Anyway, he donated this amazing 70-acre estate to the University of Mississippi and donated this space and time, him and his wife, Renee Grisham, to one writer a year to live there for 9 months and to teach at the University of Mississippi. So we just thought that was going to be our, like, kind of National Lampoon Southern vacation, Southern adventure. We thought 9 months done and we'll go back to New York. And I tell you, Ruben, like, within 1 month, I just fell in love with Mississippi. And that is a place, to be honest, I shocked myself, I mean, the things that you normally see in pop culture about Mississippi were not great, let's put it that way. And but I'm ashamed to admit it, I kind of bought into that until I actually saw and interacted with people who lived here. And this place is far from perfect by any means, but the best endorsement I can say is that I'm not the only brown person here. Mm. And where I was that for many locations that I lived in. And also there is a warmth and a kindness here and a directness when speaking about race that I've never encountered anywhere else. Like, it's also the only place where nobody asks me that dreaded question, what are you, and I don't know if it's a matter of, like, Southern manners, or they've just had to have these hard conversations about race so directly, since everybody was kids here, so, like, I lived in Western New York for 15 years and I experienced more racism and microaggressions there than I ever have in Mississippi. So I just wanted to mention that because that's something that until I lived here, I did not know that was possible. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I think it's important to admit it as well. So I'm going to read just a little snippet of this essay. It's called Questions While Searching for Birds with My Half-White Sons, age 6 and 9, on National Audubon Bird Count Day in Oxford, Mississippi. And what it is, so we were tracking these birds and I had a notebook with me and a pencil, and it was the easiest. I feel guilty including it because I just basically kind of moved things around. Everything in here is just dictated down from my 2 sons' conversations. And I'm going to read a part where just hopefully you can see the variety. What I appreciate about this time spent outdoors with my kids is it's a chance for us to just unplug a little bit questions that they wouldn't normally ask, I think, around a dinner table even, come up a little bit freer when we're out and about, just walking around outdoors. So I'm not going to read the entire thing, but here's a sampling of some of the questions that they asked me. Mommy, if we're going to look for birds all day, is anyone going to be looking for us if we get lost? I thought you said God has his eye on every sparrow, so why are we counting if he already knows? Mommy, is there a bathroom nearby? Why do lady cardinals look so sad and boy cardinals look like they are going to a party? Someone said at school, bees are going missing, and if we don't see any more bees, we're going to go missing too. Is that true, Mommy? I don't want to be missing, but if I am, can I be missing with you? What about Daddy? I don't want Daddy to be missing. Mommy, what is camouflage? Mommy, you are like a lady cardinal because you are brown. But why do you have better camouflage than Daddy? Right now, I have medium camouflage. Will I be brown or white when I grow up? Mommy, what is some white people not like brown people? Don't worry, Mommy. You can hide in the forest from those bad people. You have good camouflage. Can I have good camouflage even though I'm half and half? At school, we have to hide under our desks in case of bad people. It's called lockdown. We did that last week. We have to be quiet, like what we're doing now, while we wait for birds. Mommy, why are there people who will hunt kids? I'll just pause there to, and it's interesting, like, yeah, I get choked up kind of when I revisit that because none of it was scripted, couldn't have planned at all. And that was a moment I remember distinctly, like none of the teachers had given us the heads up that they were going to be doing these so-called lockdown situations. And this was still fairly fresh from Newtown and Connecticut and things like that. So I think even just getting a heads up so that I could have that conversation with them first before they go into school. But it just, and they weren't scared necessarily. I think they were wanting to see what my facial expressions were, but they were just saying it so matter-of-factly. And that's what took my breath away, is that it was as if they were saying, Mommy, we had a spelling test today, and that's what took my breath away. It just destroyed me a little bit. I had to kind of like turn away so they wouldn't see me crying because I didn't want them to get scared. I don't know. Anyway, so it's things like that. And the essay goes on for a little bit, but, and it wasn't all heavy. There's some light parts to it as well, but there's, brothers squabbling in there too. But I was so struck that it was being outside is what it took for the boys to kind of confide in me that, oh, we've been having these things called lockdowns. And I had no idea. I had no idea that they were doing that at school.
It's interesting that this very like kind of free space gave them that kind of contrast of having to be locked down.
Yeah.
But it's also sad that that's become a way of life.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think like you and I, we probably had, I don't know for sure, but we, for example, like, I lived in Chicago until I was in second grade, and I remember having tornado drills in the hallways. I went to school in Park, just outside of Morton Grove there, and I remember being like, walked out into the hallways, tuck your head down, and that was it. And it wasn't really ever scary to me. It was, we were all giggling around and, but.
Yeah. Well, I was reminded when you were talking about getting under the table. I grew up in California. I grew up in Los Angeles.
Oh, that's right. So you didn't probably have tornado. Did you have hurricane? Or did you have
We had earthquake drills.
Yeah.
And we had to get under the table, and so I was immediately, the first thing I thought of was an earthquake drill. But yeah, I mean, that's something that, it's an act of God, as some might say. And so it just, it was natural. And this is something that I would go home and tell my, my family, oh, we did this. And it was completely reasonable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it just breaks my heart that they even have to have these, that they have to have this question, to which I don't even remember my answer. I'm sure it was not great, because it just took me so unaware of, like, why are there people that will hunt kids? Like, that's an absolute question that they had, and for which I still don't really have an answer,
Ooh.
So anyway, but I wanted to include, thank you for asking about my kids, though, because I know, again, so much of this book is, I had so many questions growing up when I read so much nature writing, and so many books of The Giant Squid or The Secret Life of Ants or something like that. And I never really saw glimpses of a person's life of anybody brown, certainly. And if children were mentioned, it was very much like, well, I said goodbye to them, and then I went on a hike to Yellowstone Mountains or something, you know what I mean? So I really wanted to showcase, essays here where you couldn't extract me from my parents. You couldn't extract me from my kids. You couldn't extract me from being a wife, or a teacher, or all the hats that I have. I wanted this to be a part of this collection.
I really love how much of, it's all about the natural world, and so it's something that I haven't had much exposure to, because I grew up in a city.
Yeah.
And even though there was access to more rural areas of California, it wasn't, and I hate to admit it, but it wasn't until this past summer, and as I was reading, the book, it wasn't until this past summer that I actually held a firefly.
Oh, really? Oh, that's amazing. But you know what? Hey, the fact is that you did it, though. That's huge. I mean, I go into several classrooms, and the numbers are decreasing when I say, okay, show of hands, who has caught a firefly before? I've been doing that kind of same question for about 10 years, and the numbers are dwindling and dwindling and dwindling. So, but the fact is that you did it. So I will never make fun of anybody's, circumstances of their relationship to the outdoors, because I know that's also an important thing that's very fraught, and everybody has different relationships. I have several dear Black friends who tell me regularly, Aimee, I do not feel comfortable outside. You will never catch me in the woods, because bad things happen to Black folks in the woods. That's the kind of things that they're saying to me, and I absolutely agree. Like, so this doesn't try to diminish those experiences at all. It's just one way to kind of say, hey, there's room at the table for all of these experiences. I want to hear so much about that sensation of you catching a firefly for the first time. Like, to me, I want to hear those experiences. I don't need to necessarily always hear the expert opinion on these things.
And as Heather in our chat notes, that fireflies are decreasing, and that's what I heard too. And that's one of the reasons I was really excited about. I went camping in Wisconsin, and I was in this field. It was just very flat, and you could just see everything light up at here and there. It was incredible. But there, I don't know. I don't like bugs, so I was a bit hesitant. But I was visiting my partner's family there, and his 10-year-old nephew is just like touching everything. He's like, here, look. So I was a bit hesitant, but I did it.
Oh, that makes me so happy. That makes me so happy. I feel like they're not, I know they're bugs, and I don't want to get scientists upset with me even more, but I feel like there's an exception, because they're just so magical, and they don't bite. They're so sweet, and I don't know. Anyway, so I'm so proud of you, Ruben. That's awesome.
Thank you. Well, in the essay about the fireflies, you talk about wonder, and your collection's called World of Wonders, but in it you say that it requires that we put ourselves in the right place at the right time when you're talking about wonder. And you know, I wonder how do you what do you have? I mean, considering, you know, we're kind of stuck indoors, how do you go about finding that in this kind of new way of life?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And you know, and every day is like, or every week is kind of, you know, it's a malleable, shape-shifting answer, right? Because I mean, honestly, every day, I don't know about you, Ruben, but I crack open my laptop almost just nervous, like, what plague or what crazy news item is happening today, you know, and that's gonna shift, you know. I didn't know, for example, on Friday that the leader of the free world would be diagnosed with COVID. And you know, I mean, I didn't know, like, I think today I saw something that there was a giant mummy that was being unearthed and opened. Did you see that? Like from
No.
2500 years. And so, you know, my first thought was like, no, you know, like, we don't need any more you know, a bad omen or something like that, you know, keep that closed, let the mummy rest in peace, you know, all this stuff. But yeah, I think it's definitely become more of a practice than just, you know, I want to be absolutely 100% clear. It's not like I'm walking around during the pandemic finding wonder left and right over my shoulder, you know, that kind of thing. It is definitely, there's definitely been harder days than others, where there's days where I don't want to get out of bed and I just want to have my weighted blanket over me, you know. I think it's also important to admit that as well. But I think if you can get yourself to a point where maybe it's something as simple as learning, say, 3 types of clouds. Like, you teach yourself how to identify 3 types of clouds, and you can do that from your window. You don't have to be outside for that. You know, you can sketch it. Just simply get a small little notebook, sketch them. There's enough videos and there's enough free resources online that you could really teach yourself how to identify 3 of the major cloud groups. You know, that's something, if that interests you. The key with wonder is that it needs to be something that you're interested in, that makes that curiosity grow more. And one of the roots of the word wonder is to smile. So it's not just like, oh, I want to learn more about clouds, but what is it about clouds that makes me smile? Like, what is that? That's when you know you are wondering. Well, that's when you know when you're filled with wonder. So given all of that, and given that we're in the middle of a pandemic, those seem completely at odds with each other, right? But I think it doesn't have to necessarily be outdoors, you know. I mean, I was finding, I don't know, I was finding kind of wonderment in um stone fruit that I had just gotten from Mississippi's farmers markets, just peaches and nectarines a couple months ago. And I don't know, just for the first time looking at the peach pit, you know, and I had never really looked at a peach pit before, drying them out, because I was thinking, oh, maybe I could try to grow them. Didn't quite work, or I don't think I had the right soil for it. But it's just something that makes you smile and want to know more about. Because honestly, one of the biggest sadnesses, frankly, about some people in our current administration is how much ignorance and avoiding science has been almost lauded in some ways. And to me, that goes against everything that we try to teach our kids, that we learned in school, and that you should be always wanting to be a student of this planet. You should always be wanting to learn about other things besides yourself. You know, what does make a rainbow? You know, how does rain get formed? These are some basic kind of science questions. But if you don't know the answers to that, that could be a place to start. You know what I mean? So again, you don't need to be an expert. I am no ornithologist. I am no zoologist. But just find whatever it is that makes you curious and that makes you smile. And I think before you know it, you'll be having a sense of wonder.
That's lovely. It looks like in our chat, many people are familiar with the fireflies, lightning bugs. It looks like I wondered what lightning bugs were, but now I see it's just a different term for it.
Yeah, you know, I think here in Mississippi, my students call them lightning bugs, I think. But you know, in Western New York, Ohio, we call them fireflies. So yeah, but there's definitely all kinds of, and in my book, I think there's so many more. there's so many more names for them, like the Texas Tinies. I'll read this paragraph from it, maybe. Let me see. What happens when you don't have these words ready to pop up on your tongue? The shadow ghosts, the sidewinder, the Florida sprite. These are all names for fireflies. Mr. Mac, Little Gray, the Murky Flash Train, the Texas Tinies, the Single Snappy, the Treetop Flashers, the July Comets, the Tropic Travelers, Christmas Lights, the Slow Blues, the Tiny Lucy, that's one of my favorites, Tiny Lucy's, the Mischievous Marsh Imps, the Sneaky Elves, and my personal favorites, these last two, the Heebie-Jeebies and the Wiggle Dancers. I just love that. There's, and I have not met someone who actually calls fireflies heebie-jeebies, but they're out there somewhere. So I'm dying to meet the person that talks like that,
Oh, funny.
It's great though. Like, that's what I mean. Like, I started the essay about lightning bugs in a memory of my mom. But the more I got into reading about them, I kept picking up, they don't call them just lightning bugs. They're Texas Tinies. They're the heebie-jeebies. They're the treetop flashers, So it's hard not. And then slowly I could actually physically feel myself smiling every time I read another. And this wasn't just in one setting. This was just over the course of a lifetime of reading about fireflies. Every time I made a note of like, gosh, they're not just fireflies and lightning bugs, the two, and that's when I started smiling. That's when I realized, oh gosh, this is wonderment right here.
Wow. I'm curious how you go about putting these essays together. There's so much information about the different creatures that are in the essays, and each essay is focused on a different creature in nature, or being in nature. I was especially drawn to the essay on the flamingo, mostly because it felt like the imagination really leaps. It's about dancing during your freshman year of college, going out at night, and then the legs, dancing in the legs, and then it goes to the legs of the flamingo, and then the flamingo, and this like kind of horrific moment with the flamingo in Florida, and then this horrific kind of parallel moment that has to do with the nightlife, and a death. So I'm curious how you go about making these connections. Like, what comes first?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I don't have a standard answer for every essay, but in that essay in particular, well, I can tell you there is a standard essay. I always start very similar to poems in that I start with an image. I guess in essays, it would be a scene. So the scene that I had wanted to write was the moment when I read, so my folks live in Central Florida. The main kind of zoo, the closest zoos that we would go to or visit with the kids are in the Tampa area. So there's a place called Busch Gardens. And the mascot of this, it's like a theme park / zoo, kind of all smushed together in Tampa. The mascot of this place was a flamingo named Pinky. And I'm not giving too much away because it says it straight up. That was the impetus of this piece. And it was the moment, and there was a scene, and this happened not that long ago, but it was a very unstable man who clearly was suffering from a mental illness, came up, and Pinky, the living flamingo, the living mascot of this zoo park, was kind of grabbed by this man and hoisted over his head and then just slammed to the concrete. Like, and I was not there, but I have a dear friend who was not in the zoo part, but was in the theme park at the time. So there was a whole commotion. They kind of shut down the whole animal area. And I didn't realize, I mean, who would even think of this stuff, right? I didn't realize, she said, Aimee, Pinky was basically like the legs were so mangled, so messed up, and there was such a loss of blood. Pinky had to be euthanized, and it just never occurred to me. You see, flamingos as almost this kind of tropical, um, almost like ridiculous bird. It's like when you put a flamingo on something, there's a reverence there, right?
Yeah.
You forget that these are breathing, living birds with family structures and a symbol of joy for many kids, especially in a zoo situation. And to see this happen, to know that this happened in front of a crowd of kids was just so horrifying to me. I didn't know exactly what I was going to write. I just needed to recreate this on the page. And as I was kind of working on this, a young co-ed from my alma mater at Ohio State was killed in a very brutal way. As she was a bartender or waitress, and it wasn't that late at night, but it was along the same streets that my girlfriends and I used to walk alone, not alone. I was always walking with friends, but walking at night too, coming to and from dance clubs, um, and so those two together, I'd never planned it in 1,000 years. And then add to that, young Aimee, since 8 years old, had been reading about flamingos, just in awe, learning how to draw them and things like that. So all of that together kind of came together in this essay. And I guess maybe I put it together in the same way, Ruben, that someone would make, as Robert Bly calls them, leaps in poetry. This makes you think of this, and this makes you think of this, and this makes you think of this. So yeah, it's jolting, but my hope is that overall you see the connections, that you're taken by the hand by me and not just shoved around in this essay. Here you think that I'm going to bring you to this scene, then this scene, so that you feel angry and say like, hey, slow down, I want to relish in these sentences for a little bit, but rather I'm jolted because these situations are so jolting as well. So that was a hard one to write, because I wanted to make sure I got the young woman's death accurately, that I didn't sensationalize it, that I didn't make it more macabre than it needed to be. I also wanted to do the same for Pinky as well, the flamingo.
Yeah, I see those leaps there. I mean, they're there, and I thought they were so poetic, which is I think probably why it sticks with me. And it's probably the essay that I remember most, and it's probably because of those leaps. And the leaps aren't jolting. I think that what the content, the material is what's jolting. But I thought it was done very, very well. I thought it was done exceptionally well. And so I was just thinking like, wow, I wish I would have written this. It's one of those moments where you just love the way it's been put together, and you think, how can I do that?
Oh, good. Thank you. I know that's like the highest compliment, when you read something it makes you want to write. I get that all the way. I was like that with Cheryl Strayed, and actually Eula Biss, the two that you mentioned earlier. So I get that a lot with other writers as well. Yeah.
I started reading this in the paperback version.
Oh, okay.
And then I got behind my shoulder is the hardcover, and I noticed that they're in completely different order. Like
yes.
that. So, I mean, is there a particular reason for the organization?
Yeah, and different content too. That's why I feel like, we had to get the galleys ready, for something called Winter Institute, and that's where I met the good folks from Unabridged Bookstore. And those were as ready as they could be at the time. But I'm a Capricorn at heart, and so I just was, and I still, if I still had the chance, I would still probably push on it more. Same thing as with poems too. I still want to make pencil notes in my finished books, and think, oh, I wish I could have changed that. But what you have there in the hardback is the order that I am happy with. I am happy with the order. A lot of the endings of the essays are changed and everything like that too. So I always wanted to put a little like Post-it note on all the galleys, like, please don't quote any of this, because some of them are vastly different than the final book. Ultimately it came down to in this book, I wanted to avoid chronological order, like starting, some of the earliest essays that mentioned me was when I was 4 years old. So I didn't want to start out, here's 4-year-old Aimee and ends with Aimee from last year, Um, and, I had some brilliant readers who were like, Aimee, just, you moved around so much when you were younger, and that absolutely informed you. Why not make the reader move around as well? And they'll figure it out. If you're talking about a child here, but a couple essays down, you're in 6th grade, they'll know that you're not in 6th grade having a child. And I was really hesitant on that because I like having a nice, neat, again, I'm a Capricorn. I like having a nice, neat, orderly thing, but it was actually the best advice. And I love being able, with this new order, my hope is that the reader, and you can answer this maybe, Ruben, my hope is that the reader finds connections like, oh, no wonder I saw that from 4-year-old Aimee. Now a little bit here, she's still trying to camouflage here, or this sensation is still happening when Amy's a teenager, and now here as a wife, or about to date the man who would eventually become her husband. There's a little bit of sassiness there. Same thing from 6-year-old Aimee. So I'm hoping that readers can make those kind of callbacks, because actually when I read, I like finding those little discovery moments. So my hope is that the reader gets those discovery moments too.
That's very nice. Are there any essays that didn't make it into the final that will appear somewhere later, maybe?
We'll see. I mean, really, I had that. You're gonna laugh at this, and it sounds crazy, but this was over the course of a decade. I had 200 animals and plants that I whittled down to my top 20, my 30 here. And it doesn't mean that they were all good. And there's a good reason why many of them were pushed aside. But who knows if there's going to be like a part 2, or I don't know. But really, what I had a very high bar on which animals and plants I would include here, and that was simply if I didn't find a connection naturally, I was not going to force it. So that was number 1. And then number 2, if I didn't have put myself in them, there's a couple in there, like the cassowary is one of them, where I didn't put myself in it. I would feel good about the amount of either research or presenting that plant or animal in a way that would still feel fresh and new to someone who was an expert in those with that animal or plant. So that really helped me whittle it down from that list. I mean, again, I had that dream list of 200 plants and animals, and there's still every day, every week, certainly, there's still a plant or animal I'll come across, I'll remember and say, why didn't I should have said, stop the presses, I need to do one more. But I think the folks at Milkweed would have been like saying, okay, Aimee, time to wrap this up now. This is not Decade of Wonders,
Would you mind reading something else for us? I know that there's some beautiful illustrations too. So maybe you can share some of those with us as well.
Just a little bit from the cassowary. And yeah, so this book, I can't take any credit from this. This, I talked about how I didn't really see books that were written by Asian Americans for nature writing, or at least I certainly didn't see them in the libraries that I went to, the nature writing classes that I took, the environmental studies classes I took. So it was really important to me to find an Asian American illustrator as well. And my first choice was the one who said yes, and that's Fumi Nakamura. And she's the one who did this entire, the cover, and then throughout there's these beautiful illustrations that Mary Austin Speaker, the designer at Milkweed Books, did kind of these spot colors to kind of do a callback to the textbooks from the 60s and 70s that just only had one color to them. The cassowary has 2 because you almost have to have 2 colors with that. But yeah, they just hit it out of the ballpark. I could not be more happy. I wanted them, the illustrations to be biologically correct, but maybe just have like 2% whimsy there as well. So the scariest bird in the world, I think, to me, is something called the southern cassowary. I don't know if, I was supposed to see one at the Atlanta Zoo actually this summer, and Cecil was his name, and he passed away.
Oh.
The other one, the main kind of event And I try not to go to zoos that have not been vetted by animal rights activists and stuff. So the only other one that I would have been able to visit that meets those criteria of being well cared for and things like that is there's one in the San Diego Zoo, but I don't know when that's ever gonna happen with the pandemic. So that's a beautiful zoo. Have you been there, Ruben?
I've never been there. No.
San Diego Zoo is like the top notch. It's the zoo. It's the zoo that all the other standards are, trying to meet. The care for the animals is so great. And anyway, so I'm going to read a little section of the southern cassowary. They call this animal the living dinosaur. I think it really is one of those last remaining creatures here on the planet. It's just so otherworldly, and you'll see why I'm scared of it in just a minute. The southern cassowary. The gumball-colored reds and blues of a cassowary's head and featherless neck can make you think of a carnival in the jungle, all festoon and bunting. It's comical from head to toe, really. The black feathers covering its body make the cassowary resemble a dark wig perched on a pair of reptilian legs. Its gaze with balloony caramel eyes can remind you of a 6-year-old's drawing. Each of its curiously plodding footsteps makes it look like it's trying to remember a forgotten dance move. But don't underestimate the cassowary. It is one of the only birds on this planet ever known to kill a human. Most notably, a Florida man, of course it's always Florida man, a Florida man kept a pair of cassowaries as pets. One day in 2019, he tripped as he was checking on the status of a new lime green egg the female had just laid. The male cassowary, startled, leapt onto the man and sliced him to death with its claw. This so-called, quote, murderous nail, as Ernest Thomas Gilliard described it in 1958, can, quote, sever an arm or eviscerate an abdomen with ease, unquote. But misguided pet owners aside, usually it's only employed when food is involved. For example, cassowaries can get used to humans feeding them and will begin to approach any human expectantly. If they're denied, they'll kick and slash, puncture and lacerate. Should this ever happen to you, the last thing you will see on this planet before you bleed out is the rush and wreck of blue skin and the candy apple red of the cassowary's waddle swinging like a pendulum above you. But it's the cassowary's casque that makes this bird extra distinctive. This hardened, dark growth of keratin on the top of the cassowary's head grows taller with age, eventually stretching a whopping 7 inches. The casque helps them figure out the acoustics of their surroundings, amplifying the sounds of a dense forest, helping them run about 30 miles an hour, even if there doesn't seem to be a clear path in the forest. Cassowaries run with their heads lowered, so the casque also functions as a helmet. A recent discovery of bones of the Corythoraptor jacobsi, a strutting dinosaur that lived during the late Cretaceous period, revealed a strikingly similar skeleton to the cassowaries, complete with a crest-like casque, reinforcing the cassowary's nickname, the living dinosaur. And I think I'll pause right there, but just, it is one of those birds you don't ever want to encounter in the jungle. Especially you don't want to startle it. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you Google the cassowaries, it's like its middle toe. That's basically, it's like a 6-inch blade.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So if it jumps on you, it's game over basically.
It's like right out of Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, it really is. And when you see this foot, you're like, yeah, that's a dinosaur. Like at first I was like, okay, maybe they're exaggerating. It's a little hyperbole. No, you'll be convinced it's a living dinosaur. So, but that's the thing, like it's not all of nature. And I very much wanted to include plants and animals here that aren't conventionally pretty or cute, and things that are scary and sad and painful to look at in some cases, and sad stories and painful stories about these as well. I didn't want this to just be like a Pippi Longstocking, la la la, I'm Snow White, let's talk to birds together, you know. That would definitely not be hitting right, especially now in a pandemic. So I'm so glad. I could never have predicted this, but I'm so glad that because I could have easily done that and said, here's all the beauty and cuteness of uh, of the world, and let's focus on that. But it didn't feel real to me.
Yeah, it's great. I think it's great. There's a little bit of nature. There's a little bit of like, I mean, it's personally driven with you and your family and the world around you. And I felt like I learned something, which is great. I mean, I love that. I love walking away and learning about the world.
Yes, that's my ultimate thing, is that I want people to feel like they learned something or traveled without ever having leaving their couch. I feel like that to have your horizon expanded just a little bit, especially when we're trapped indoors. I'm trapped indoors.
Yeah.
But yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Ruben.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you, Unabridged.
Yeah. Yay, Unabridged. You guys have been so awesome and championing. Indie bookstores in particular have been the heroes of this pandemic. People don't realize how important they are to maintain sanity, just to give us something to read, to provide this service of getting good books in people's hands. And yeah, I tell you what, when I met the folks, I've met so many indie booksellers doing these events, and just realizing like how much they are the unsung heroes of the pandemic. They're helping us all have our worlds expanded just a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We appreciate you so much for saying that. And more than that, we appreciate you both for taking the time tonight to speak with us here, to share about your book, and to have such thoughtful conversation. Like I said earlier, it's quickly become a favorite here in the shop. So for all of you listening that have joined us tonight, if you have not already got your copy, or if you're looking for a good holiday gift, anything, please pick up World of Wonders. And thank you all so much for joining us tonight. This has been so lovely.
Thank you, Ruben. These were such great questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Have a good night.
Everybody have a good night. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.